Hey parents, we live in a stressful, busy, loud, chaotic world. There are busy grocery stores and loud restaurants and sensory overwhelming birthday parties and playgrounds. And there's a lot. It's overwhelming. And for us as adults, our sensory cortex, our sensory processing integration centers in our brain and in our nervous system are fully developed and hopefully functioning so that we aren't having tantrums, we aren't having meltdowns, we're able to get through our day. But what about our kiddos? See, sensory processing disorder and sensory overload challenges are probably the number one challenge that families are struggling with today. And here's the truth, there's just not much understanding into the root cause and why your kiddo is struggling. And then the treatments offered don't really improve your quality of life very much. I mean, think about it. Most experts and medical doctors and therapists are going to say, you know what? It's just something they're going to have to grow out of. Or if certain activities are causing the overwhelm and the tantrum and the meltdowns, then you need to just, back down your schedule, avoid some of those activities. Or the other thing that we hear a lot is experts and pediatricians telling parents that, you know what, it's just a chemical overload. So get all of the chemicals out of your house. You've got to change your detergents to chemical free, get rid of red dye number 40, get rid of sugar, get rid of gluten and all of the things. And it is just overwhelming. And so the solution itself is more overwhelming or as overwhelming as the problem. And it's also encouraging parents and families to really keep to themselves and to not live their life like they want to and like they could. So in this video, we are going to take a completely different perspective, a completely different approach. We are absolutely going to explain the root cause of your kiddo's sensory overwhelm, their sensory processing challenges. We're going to show that it is not something that they will grow out of, but they will absolutely grow into other challenges down the road, like anxiety and ADHD and even autism spectrum. And so it's not something they will grow out of. And it's not their genes. It's not our busy environment or the toxins or the chemicals around them. It's actually an internal neurological change that is happening in our kiddos. They are more wound up, more stressed out, more stuck in their sympathetic mode than ever before. So let's go. This video is going to be for you if you have a kiddo who is having constant meltdowns or constant tantrums, or maybe they're having sensory issues with certain textures like tight clothing or zippers or seams in their clothing. Maybe they are really sensitive to loud sounds. Maybe they're sensitive to strong smells. Instead of limiting their quality of life, we are absolutely going to get into some of the things that action steps that you can take to get your kiddo living their best life and back to that quality of life. That actually was the story with Rebecca. She was one of our sweetest patients. And in her first 6 years, she could not handle going to the grocery store with her mom. She couldn't handle birthday parties. She couldn't even handle going to daycare. She actually got kicked out of a daycare. And by the time we met her, her parents had really just tried everything, removing those stimulating situations and trying the oils and the calm breathing. And it just wasn't working. And she had struggled through kindergarten that year. And not only was she having sensory challenges, but she was also having other challenges with her body. Like she wasn't able to sleep through the night. And at least 3 to 4 times a week, she was having bedwetting. And on top of that, she was sick all the time. And now once she started and got care, like what we're going to talk about here, within a year, she is absolutely living her best life. A year later, she has now completely nailed first grade. She wakes up dry. She does not have to wear those nighttime pull-ups anymore. And she was able to just join a new soccer team. So it wasn't the outside environment that needed to change. It wasn't those stimulating situations. It was internal. It was her internal neurology that needed to change. So I want you to know, parents, if you have a kiddo like this who's really going through it, you can get to the other side. You absolutely can change your kiddos inside neurology so that their outside environment and situation is better and what you want. So first, we have to know what is sensory overload or sensory processing disorder. Now, this picture, we're going to switch here. This poster is the easiest visual. It is the perfect description of what is going on in our kiddos. Now, here's what happens. In today's world, it's not just that we have more toxins and more noise and a busy schedule. Because I mean, our parents had those things too. Our parents had lead paint and asbestos and Mountain Dew for breakfast, and they were busy too. So it's not just the external environment. All of these things, especially when it comes to autism, anxiety, ADHD, and others, and these sensory challenges, they have absolutely erupted in this generation. So what has changed? Well, we are having our kiddos go through two significant stressors during their most developmentally important phase of life for their brain, and especially for their sensory processing component of that. In utero and in the first 12, 24, 36 months of life, so first 3 years of life, that's when the sensory processing system is really developing. It's really coming online, and it's really learning, hey, this is good information. I need to pay attention to it. Or, hey, this tag, that smell, that noise, that flashing light, that's not important information. So I don't have to pay attention to it. Now, what we see is that when our kiddos are stuck in this gas pedal mode, in this sympathetic fight or flight system, this is where that sensory processing, sensory overload, anxiety lives. This is where they get stuck in that fight or flight mode and just get overwhelmed. But what triggers it? And so what we find all the time when we dig back into our kiddos' case histories, our kiddos with sensory processing and sensory overwhelm, what we find are three factors. We call this the perfect storm. Now, in about 50 to 60% of our cases, when we really dig deep back into the prenatal history, we find that there was significant stress with mom with that pregnancy, whether it was in fertility, whether it was an ultrasound that came back off, whether there was a stressful job, whether there was a loss in the family, something that caused mom to be stressed out during that time. And the reason this is so important and plays such a big role is that mom's neurology, her brain and nervous system, is actually setting the stage for baby's developing nervous system and brain. And so when her nervous system gets stuck in that sympathetic mode, it starts to shift that fetus's neurology into that same direction. They get stuck in that fight or flight mode too. And that's probably one of the worst things about prenatal healthcare today, is that we are scaring our moms into thinking that pregnancy is a diagnosis and something that has to be medically managed. And we are just filling them with so much fear and stress and anxiety that is one of the things that we strive for in our office, is to empower our pregnant mamas and let them know that their body was created for this, and absolutely give them all of the tools, everything they need to really have a successful and stress-free, or as little stress as possible, pregnancy. So when we have that prenatal stress factor, now we're starting to rev up the engine here, okay? The next factor that we see in actually more like 80 to 90% of our patients, when we look into their history of sensory processing issues, and that is a physically traumatic birth process. Now, physically traumatic can be inductions. That's a really big one. C-sections, even a scheduled C-section is physically traumatic to their little nervous system. And then especially when we get into things like forceps and vacuum deliveries, those are all physically traumatic birth traumas. And this is probably the most overlooked aspect in pediatric healthcare, is how this shift, this physical trauma, shifts their nervous system into this fight or flight gas pedal mode. So when these two things show up, now we're revving up the engine even more. When baby is resting, they're already up here at, potentially 5,000 RPMs. So what that looks like in an infant is colic, hard to soothe, hard to sleep, hard to stay asleep. And what also happens is because of that physical trauma and force on the neck, that actually creates interference in those nerves right where that brake pedal would be, where we can turn off that off button to the gas pedal, that fight or flight mode. And so when there's damage to the off button, now we start to see things show up in that baby, like ear infections and strep and croup and RSV, respiratory infections. And so now we've got that poor little baby stressed out, stuck on fight or flight mode. And now the third thing, what do? We give them antibiotics and corticosteroids. Now, antibiotics are fantastic. They absolutely save lives. Steroids, absolutely necessary in certain situations, and they save lives. But we can also categorize those as toxins. So yes, they can be good, but when all of these things add up, when one, two, or all three of these things add up together, now we have got a kiddo who is stuck in that sympathetic mode, that gas pedal mode, fight or flight. They are not able to rest. They are not able to digest. They are not able to develop and grow. And they are stuck in overwhelm, overload. And really, the most important part that I want to show you, though, is here. I hear a lot of parents talk about, well, my kiddo goes from 0 to 10 in a split second. Well, here's the interesting part is that they're not really going from 0 to 10 in a split second. Their nervous system is already revved up. So they may already be up here at 4, 5, 6, 7 before they even have a chance to get set off. And so it's a lot easier to see that gap isn't as big as what it should be. So how do we get out of this mode? What do we do to get unstuck? The first thing we've got to do is we have got to reactivate and re-stimulate this brake pedal right here. And neurologically based pediatric chiropractic care is the only way to do that. Supplements will not do that. Therapies will not do that. Play therapy and OT therapy and all of those other things are fantastic tools that we actually use and refer to. However, if their nervous system is not, if their vagus nerve is understimulated and underdeveloped, that is the key. That is the missing piece that will make such a change in that kiddo's neurology. And then all of those supplements, all of those coping mechanisms, all of those therapies that you've been trying will actually have a much better result because we've started with the foundation first. This brake pedal is the foundation. When that brake pedal is turned on, it is specifically the vagus nerve. And there are tons of research articles about the vagus nerve and how that in sensory processing kids, the vagus nerve is underdeveloped and understimulated. So by stimulating this vagus nerve, kids are able to rest, they can relax, they can digest, their immune system starts to kick back up, their growth and healing and development are all restored just by activating that brake pedal, just by activating that vagus nerve. And that is what we specialize in. We actually have a tool in our office called the Neurological Insight Scans. And this tool allows us to take a picture to actually scan your kiddo's nervous system and to figure out where that stress could be stuck. Because what we know is that if we know where the stress is, we know how to go after it. We are specialized in a specific neurotonal technique of adjusting that doesn't look like the typical chiropractic adjustment. You might not even know that it's happening if you saw it, but it is very gentle, very specific, and very unique to your kiddo's specific neurological needs. And this is exactly what we do in order to get that brake pedal to come online and to get your kiddo functioning, living their best life, thriving, not having to avoid all of their social situations, not having to avoid going to the grocery store, not having to avoid eating out as a family at a restaurant, getting to go to those birthday parties and join that soccer team. So if this is one of your kiddos, or if you feel like this may be happening in your kiddo, whether they have experienced, prenatal stress or a physically traumatic labor and delivery, or maybe they have been sick all the time and a lot of toxins, a lot of antibiotics and medicines in their system. And now you feel like they're struggling with sensory challenges. Please reach out, leave me a comment below, send me a private message. I'm happy to answer any questions and give you more information. Share this with a friend, share this with one of your mom groups, because there are so many children and so many families that need to hear this information, and that would benefit so much just by knowing that there's another option, that there is hope for their kiddo, and that we have help and answers that they are looking for. And really, most importantly, if this is you, if this is your family, reach out, let us know, because we absolutely can get help for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.